Michael woke early in the morning to the sun shining through the crack in the bedroom curtains. Not quite awake yet, he felt the familiar warmth. Next to him, Emily was sleeping with her back to him, her light brown hair scattered in disarray on the pillow. He lingered his gaze for a few seconds on the thin line of her neck and round shoulders, barely covered by the blanket. At such moments, Michael felt a deep tenderness for his wife. The morning calm, the silence, and the feeling of being close to the person he loved more than life itself. However, as soon as he moved, Emily quietly moaned in her sleep and, muttering something, moved a little further. Michael raised himself on his elbow, trying to see her face. She was fast asleep. Her breathing was even and calm. Usually in the morning, if he woke up earlier, he woke her with a soft kiss on the shoulder or cheek, jokingly saying that it was time to get up. But today something held him back. He only sighed quietly, carefully removed a strand of hair from her face, and carefully got out of bed, trying not to disturb his wife's sleep. In the kitchen, Michael put the coffee on to brew. He enjoyed these few minutes of morning silence while the house was still asleep. The sound of the drips falling into the glass flask of the coffee maker had a calming effect and put him in a working mood. Today was going to be a normal day at the architectural firm where he worked. Meetings with clients, checking drawings, discussing new projects. Michael loved his job, although he had been feeling increasingly tired in recent months. He had long wanted to take a vacation and spend more time with Emily. It seemed like they hadn't gone anywhere together for ages. He took 2 mugs out of the cabinet. One was his, dark blue, a little chipped at the handle, but his favorite. The other was white with a bright yellow sun design that Emily had bought at a souvenir sale somewhere in Arizona before she had met him. These familiar little things in their life brought back pleasant memories. Michael remembered how Emily had laughed then, choosing the most tasteless mug from the entire store to give him later. "So that I can smile every morning," she had said then, handing over the purchase. And indeed, looking at this ridiculous yellow sun, drawn by a child's hand, Michael couldn't help but smile every time. When the coffee was ready, he filled both mugs. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee spread throughout the kitchen. Michael took a sip, savoring the bitterness of the drink, and thoughtfully looked out the window. Outside, the Chicago suburb was slowly waking up. The first car of the morning drove along the still deserted street. The neighbor across the street went out to get a newspaper, wrapping himself up from the cool September air. September. He and Emily had been married in September 9 years ago. This year was their 9th anniversary of Fayon's wedding. He smiled to himself. He had already bought a gift for his wife, a beautiful handmade porcelain box, knowing how much she loved elegant trinkets. There were a couple of weeks left until the anniversary, and Michael was looking forward to a candlelit dinner together, maybe a little surprise for her. While he was thinking, soft footsteps were heard in the hallway. Emily, yawning and throwing a light robe over her pajamas, appeared at the kitchen threshold. Her face still bore traces of sleep, slightly swollen lips, eyes narrowed from the bright light, disheveled hair. But for Michael, she was beautiful just like that homey, disheveled deer. "Good morning, sunshine," he said quietly, greeting her. "The coffee is ready." Emily tried to smile, running her hand over her face. She looked tired, sleep-deprived. Michael noticed dark circles under her eyes. "Good," she replied in a hoarse voice, approaching the table. "Thank you, dear." She sat down, cupped the warm mug in her hands, taking a small sip. Michael sat down opposite her, watching his wife carefully. Usually in the mornings, she chatted incessantly, telling him about her dreams or plans for the day, asking what he had dreamed about. Today, Emily was silent, seemed lost in herself. Her gaze wandered over the pattern on the mug, as if she was trying to remember something important, but there was nothing pleasant in these thoughts. On the contrary, a shadow of anxiety darkened her face. "Are you okay?" Michael asked softly, reaching out and covering her palm with his. Emily's skin was cool, and he stroked her fingers gently. "Didn't sleep well?" His wife flinched at his touch, as if waking up, and finally looked him in the eye. Michael caught a strange mixture of confusion and tension in her gaze, as if she had been caught doing something. But a second later, she smiled tensely. "No, everything's fine," she answered too quickly. "I just had some stupid dreams. Probably the moon in Capricorn or something." She tried to joke, looking away and taking another sip of coffee. Michael felt a twinge of anxiety. Something was definitely wrong. Emily was clearly worried about something, but she wasn't sharing it like she used to. Maybe she was having problems at work. Lately, he'd noticed that she often stayed late at the design studio where she worked as a project manager. She came home tired, sometimes distracted. He chalked it up to her workload. Their company was handling a major contract with a demanding client, and Emily said she was working overtime to get it all done. Michael tried to support her then, cooking dinner, massaging her shoulders in the evenings to relieve the tension. She thanked him, but smiled less and less. "Were you working overtime again yesterday?" he asked carefully, not wanting to seem intrusive, but also unable to hide his concern. Emily shrugged and nodded. "There was a rush job with a report. I came back very late. You were already asleep. Sorry I didn't wake you up. I just didn't have the strength for anything." "Poor thing," he said quietly, continuing to stroke her hand. "Maybe you should rest today. Take the day off, get some sleep, and gain strength. And I'll stop by tonight with Chinese food. Let's watch a movie." The sentence was out of his mouth before he had time to think. He really wanted to spend time with her, to recapture the ease and closeness that seemed to be slipping away in recent months. Michael missed their conversations. Before, they could talk for hours about everything, laugh, make plans. Now, almost every conversation was limited to everyday trivia or the exchange of routine phrases about business. Emily smiled slightly, but there was a hint of regret in her eyes. "Sounds tempting, really. But today is impossible. I have a meeting with investors after lunch. I have to be there. And anyway, there are a lot of things." Michael nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Emily pulled her hand out from under his, saying she was going to finish her coffee and run to the shower. He sat there, listening as she put her mug in the sink and hurried into the bathroom. He could hear her soft, off-key humming over the sound of the water. She often hummed songs that came to mind in the shower. But today, even that humming seemed strained, anxious. Michael finished his coffee thoughtfully. What was going on? He felt a tingle of worry creeping up on him. His relationship with Emily wasn't perfect like everyone else. They had disagreements, quarrels over trivial things. But they had always been open with each other before. And now, she was clearly hiding something. Maybe she just didn't want to burden him with her problems. He remembered how a month ago he noticed her crying in the kitchen at night. Emily had brushed it off, saying she had watched a sad movie before going to bed, and that was why she had burst into tears. Michael had hugged her and given her chamomile tea, but the aftertaste of anxiety remained. "I need to support her," he thought. "Maybe I should surprise her, take her mind off the stress, take a couple of days off, and go somewhere for the weekend." Having silently decided to return to this idea in the evening, Michael got up to get ready for work. While he was shaving in front of the mirror, Emily's silhouette flashed in the reflection. She came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, and headed to the bedroom to get dressed. Michael glanced after her. His wife's figure still attracted him as much as at the beginning of their affair. Slender legs, the curve of her hips, a thin waist. Sometimes he did not believe that this beautiful woman next to him for almost a decade had been his wife. His beloved wife, for whom he was ready to do anything. He smiled at his reflection, telling himself that everything would be fine. Maybe after the reporting period, everything would return to normal at her work, and they would become the same again, close, loving like before. He just needed to be patient a little bit. As they both prepared to leave, he in a business suit and tie, she in an elegant blouse and knee-length skirt, Michael approached Emily in the hallway as she pulled on her low-heeled shoes. "Hey," he said softly, getting her attention. He gently wrapped his arms around her waist. "Are you sure you're okay? You've been kind of sad lately." Emily glanced at him, and Michael again noticed the shadow of worry in her beautiful green eyes. But she nodded. "Everything is fine, really. Sorry if I'm depressing you. I'm just a little tired." He nudged her chin with his hand, forcing her to look straight at him, and smiled, trying to add as much warmth to his voice as possible. "I love you. Do you know that?" Emily flinched slightly, as if struck. Then she looked down. "I love you too," she answered quietly a second later. Michael kissed her, gently, trying to put all the support he could into the kiss. It seemed to him that Emily responded tensely, as if she was holding herself in this embrace with force. He pulled away, looking into her face, but she turned away, opening the door. "Let's go, otherwise we'll be late," she said suddenly in a cheerful tone, going out onto the porch. Michael followed her, feeling the anxiety building in his chest. They got into the car, it was his turn to drive, and within minutes they were driving along the familiar route as usual. Emily scrolled through her phone's news feed, barely speaking. Michael tried to start a conversation a couple of times about the weather, about dinner plans, but received monosyllabic responses. When he dropped her off at the design studio where she worked, Emily gave him a quick kiss on the cheek goodbye and slid out of the car without even looking back. Michael watched her as she practically ran toward the entrance, clutching her bag. His heart suddenly sank painfully. It felt like his wife was running away from his love, his care. But why? He exhaled slowly, trying not to jump to any conclusions. Maybe she really was just swamped with work and was completely consumed by the problems of the project. No need to dramatize, he told himself as he set off. But the bitterness in his soul remained. Michael drove in silence for a few more minutes, lost in his thoughts, until he finally pulled himself together. He had things to do ahead of him, and he needed to concentrate. He turned up the radio, trying to distract himself with the music, and headed toward his office. But deep down, he already felt that an invisible crack had run through their normal life that morning, and something irreparably painful was waiting for him, something he couldn't yet understand. They met on a hot July evening at a noisy party at a mutual friend's when they were about 25. Michael had just gotten a job as a junior architect at a firm and felt on top of the world. Emily worked at a small design firm and had just arrived in Chicago after college. Michael hadn't planned on going to that party at all. He was tired after work and wanted to get some sleep. But an old friend persuaded him to drop by, at least for a short while. Who would have thought that it was there that he would meet his future wife? Emily caught his attention at first sight. She was standing at a makeshift bar with a glass of sangria, animatedly chatting with some girl. She was wearing a light sea green summer dress that emphasized her tan and slender figure. The reddish reflections of the sun played in her light brown hair. But most of all, Michael was struck by her smile, open, sincere. It seemed to illuminate everything around her. He suddenly wanted so badly for this smile to be addressed to him. Michael plucked up his courage and walked over to introduce himself. His heart was pounding like crazy as he awkwardly said something like, "Hello, I don't think we've met. I'm Michael." Emily turned to him, her eyes dancing with joy. "Emily," she said, extending her hand. When their palms touched, Michael felt a slight electric shock, that moment when you realize, this is it, fate is smiling on you. They talked all evening, forgetting about the other guests. It turned out that they had a lot in common. Both were interested in art, loved hiking and camping, and adored Italian cuisine. Emily told funny stories about her college years in Boston, about how she decided to give up everything and move to another city for the sake of her dream of working as an interior designer. Michael listened with bated breath and admired her lively facial expressions, the way she clasped her hands when she laughed, how enthusiastically her eyes sparkled when she talked about her favorite thing. By the end of the evening, they were flirting without shame. Michael felt like a teenager falling in love for the first time. His hands were shaking slightly with excitement. His cheeks were flushed. He didn't want to let Emily go home alone, so he offered to walk her home. They walked through the night streets, illuminated by the yellow lights of the street lamps, their hands soon intertwined of their own accord. Emily hummed a tune under her breath. Michael later learned that it was her favorite Billy Joel song. When they reached the door of her rented apartment, Michael took a chance and kissed her tenderly goodbye. Emily kissed him back, and in that moment, the world around her seemed to cease to exist. There were only the two of them under the starry sky of the big city. After that meeting, they became inseparable. The first years of their relationship were full of passion and romance. Michael recalled how they would take spontaneous weekend trips once they went to Lake Michigan to see the sunrise, taking a thermos of coffee and a blanket. Emily would then cuddle up to him under the whisper of the morning waves, and he felt like the happiest man on earth. Other times, they would wander around museums for hours, then sit in small cafes, chatting about everything under the sun. Life was bright and rich. Each day brought new discoveries about each other. 2 years later, Michael proposed. He prepared for a long time. He chose a beautiful place, an observation deck of a skyscraper with a view of the night city, bought a ring with a small sapphire. Emily adored the color blue. He remembered how his knees shook when he dropped to one and asked her to become his wife. Emily burst into tears of happiness and, laughing through her tears, said yes. They hugged right there, under the stars and lights of Chicago, and the people around them on the platform applauded, congratulating them. Their wedding was small but cozy. They were married in a small church on the outskirts of town, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. Emily wore a simple white dress, a wreath of wildflowers in her hair, and looked, in Michael's opinion, more beautiful than any princess. As they exchanged vows, his throat tightened with emotion. He promised to love her, protect her, and be with her through thick and thin for the rest of her life, and he never doubted the sincerity of those words. The first years of marriage passed happily. They rented a cozy house in the suburbs, both worked a lot, but found time for each other. Every anniversary, they came up with something special, either a candlelit dinner at home with homemade pizza, their tradition from the first days together, or a joint parachute jump. Emily spent a long time persuading Michael to take this crazy step, and in the end, he admitted that it was one of the best experiences in his life. They were a team, they supported each other in everything. Of course, there were difficulties. They didn't manage to save up for their own home right away, they had to economize. Emily's career didn't immediately take off for a couple of years. She changed several companies in search of a decent position and salary, and during those periods, she was very worried. Michael consoled her, assured her that she was talented and that she would succeed. When she was finally hired as a project manager at a famous design studio, they celebrated all night, drinking champagne on the porch of their house and making wishes on falling stars. Over time, their lives settled into a measured routine. They both focused on their careers, often working late at work. By the 8th year of marriage, they discovered, to their surprise, that they spent less time together, talking more about business than about feelings. Sometimes in the evenings, Michael felt tired and just wanted to watch TV, and Emily scrolled through something on her laptop. Romance seemed to become a memory of youth, giving way to quiet family warmth, but also to everyday routine. Michael wasn't too worried about it. He was sure that lasting love would survive the inevitable cooling of passions. Their intimacy had become calmer, more predictable, but no less precious. He still considered Emily the most important part of his life, even if they now talked more about bills and plans for a kitchen renovation than about dreams under the stars. He believed that the main thing was that they were together, that they trusted each other. Conversations about children came up from time to time, but they weren't seriously planning an addition to the family. Sometimes their careers came first. Sometimes it seemed like they weren't ready to sacrifice the spontaneity of their lives. "There's time," Emily would say, and Michael would agree. Deep down, he imagined himself as a father, but he didn't rush things, waiting for her to have the same desire. Sometimes Michael noticed a slight sadness in his wife's eyes, especially when they returned from yet another corporate event or meeting with friends, where everyone discussed successes, travels, new purchases. Emily seemed to be burdened by something, but she did not share, and he did not insist, thinking that every family has its own little secrets and periods of silence. Looking back now, Michael would give anything to return to those carefree times of the first years when her every touch made his heart skip a beat, when they could laugh for no reason and kiss in the rain, and when there was no longer that icy distance between them that had formed now. But time cannot be turned back, and the happiness that seemed eternal began to crack. And Michael still believed that this crack could be repaired with love and patience, not suspecting how deep it actually lay. All day long, Michael felt an unpleasant anxiety, lodged somewhere under his ribs. His thoughts kept returning to his wife's strange behavior in the morning. He tried to brush it off, probably everything really was explained by fatigue and stress. But his heart seemed to know more than his mind, and the alarm bell did not subside. Work was not going well that day. During the morning meeting, Michael caught himself daydreaming a couple of times, ignoring his colleagues' words. One of the employees even asked if everything was okay, to which Michael smiled tensely and cited lack of sleep. Having barely sat through the meeting, he returned to his desk and mechanically stared at the computer screen with the drawings of the new project. The lines and numbers blurred before his eyes. Questions were spinning in his head. Why was Emily so distant? Was she sick? Or maybe someone had offended her. During his lunch break, he pulled out his phone and texted his wife. "How is your day? Don't forget to eat lunch. Love." Emily used to respond almost immediately, sending a funny smiley or a short, "You're the best, thanks for reminding me." But today, time passed, and there was no answer. Michael tried calling, but the call went straight to voicemail. Strange. He remembered that she had said they were meeting with investors after lunch, but now it was only 12 o'clock. Where was she? Michael put the phone down, telling himself there was no reason to panic, maybe an urgent meeting, maybe the sound was off. But the residue of anxiety only grew. He barely touched the sandwich he had brought with him, and spent the rest of the day mechanically completing current tasks, constantly glancing at the phone. It wasn't until around 4 o'clock that Emily sent a short message. "Sorry, I'm busy, I'll call you later." No smiley face, no familiar words. Dry and formal, as if a business partner had written. Michael frowned. That wasn't like her. He quickly replied, "Okay, I'm waiting. Love." But there was no further news until the evening. Returning home from work, Michael felt how empty the house seemed without his wife. Usually, Emily returned later than him, but this time the clock on the wall was already 8 o'clock in the evening, and she was still not there. He tried calling again without result. Imagining that she was tired, perhaps driving, he decided to cook dinner to distract himself. As he chopped vegetables for a salad, Michael found himself listening to every sound of the car outside the window. At 8:30, the sound of a door opening was heard. Michael immediately ran out into the hallway. Emily entered, holding a folder with documents and a laptop. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was slightly smudged. Her eyes were red, as if from long work or tears. At this thought, Michael's heart sank. "Hi," he hurried to her, taking the heavy folder from her hands. "I was starting to worry. Why didn't you answer?" Emily smiled tiredly at the corners of her lips and pulled off her shoes. "Sorry, Michael. I was completely overwhelmed. My phone was dead. I only noticed it in the car." She spoke quietly, avoiding his eyes, and walked past him into the living room, clearly eager to end the conversation. Michael followed, feeling a mixture of relief at her return and growing alarm at her aloofness. "Have you had dinner?" he asked, following her into the kitchen. "I made a salad and heated up the pasta." Emily put the laptop on the table and rubbed her temples. "To be honest, I can't eat anything. I'm so tired. I think I'll just take a shower and go to bed." Michael frowned with concern. "Are you sure you don't need anything? Maybe I should make some tea. Does your head hurt?" She shook her head, already heading towards the bedroom. "Everything is fine. Sorry, just a hard day." He remained standing in the middle of the kitchen, watching her go. Something was wrong here. Before, no matter how tired she was, Emily would at least tell a little about what had happened, spill out her emotions. She would get angry at her colleagues or laugh at their mishaps. Now, there was a complete reluctance to talk, as if she was putting up a wall between them. A few minutes later, the sound of running water came from the bathroom. Michael sat down heavily on a chair, trying to calm the unpleasant suspicions. Maybe he really was winding himself up. There were terrible days when a person just wanted to be in silence. Perhaps the best thing to do was to leave her alone for now. He put the untouched dinner in the refrigerator so it wouldn't spoil and went back into the living room. Emily's purse was lying on the coffee table next to her laptop. Michael couldn't help but glance at the slightly open zipper. His wife's cell phone was sticking out from there, the same one that had supposedly run out of battery. The screen was now blinking, the phone was on, and, apparently, working. Michael froze. He remembered clearly, when she came in, she said her phone was dead. But there it was, on. Maybe she had managed to charge it in the car. But why didn't she call him back, knowing he was worried? Everything inside him went cold. His stomach twisted into a tight knot. Michael carefully, as if afraid of getting burned, took her phone from her bag. The screen asked for a PIN code. Of course, he didn't know the password. There had never been a need before. They trusted each other enough not to check their phones. His hand shook. What was he doing, exactly? Rummaging through someone else's phone like a jealous husband from a cheap soap opera. It was unworthy, and what would it lead to? Would he find answers there, or just more questions? He put the device back, disgusted with himself. He needed to calm down. He would just talk to her tomorrow when she had rested. They could always discuss everything honestly. Surely Emily would open up now if he was patient. Michael walked into the bedroom. The water was still running in the bathroom. He changed into a t-shirt and trousers, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. His heart was pounding. He was scared. Scared to admit to himself that he really did suspect his beloved wife of something terrible, of cheating. Never before had such a thought even come close. They had always been honest with each other, hadn't they? Emily soon emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a terry robe, her hair falling in damp strands over her shoulders. She raised her eyebrows in surprise when she noticed Michael on the bed. "Are you still awake?" He shook his head. "I was waiting for you. I thought maybe we could chat about how your day went." Emily looked down and started looking for something in the dresser, probably pajamas. "Sorry, I'm really too tired. Let's do it tomorrow, okay?" Michael sat up, dangling his legs over the side of the bed. "Emily, I think something is wrong between us. You've become distant. I'm worried about you." He spoke quietly, trying not to sound accusatory, but rather concerned. Emily froze with her back to him, then abruptly continued rummaging through the drawer. "It's okay, Michael. I'm just swamped at work." "Are you sure it's just work?" he asked outright, before he could think. "Maybe there's something else going on that you're not telling me about." Emily turned around, her gaze wary, even frightened. "What do you mean?" Michael stood up and came closer, trying to meet her eyes. "I don't know. I have a feeling that you are unhappy. Maybe I did something wrong. Are you angry with me? You can tell me everything, because we are one team, remember?" He touched her shoulder lightly, but Emily immediately pulled away. "You didn't do anything wrong. Just stop, okay?" She suddenly blurted out. "You don't need to analyze my every word and move. Everyone has difficult periods." Michael pulled his hand away in confusion. "I just want to help." Emily closed her eyes for a second, as if holding back the emotions that were flooding her. "Sorry, I didn't mean to lose my temper." Her voice wavered. "Thank you for your concern, but honestly, everything's fine." She turned away again, as if the conversation was over. Michael felt repulsed. His throat was tight with suppressed feelings. In times like these, he would have hugged her from behind, buried his nose in her wet hair, and not let go until she shared what was on her mind. But now he was afraid of any unnecessary movement, as if he was standing on the edge of an abyss, and one wrong step could destroy everything. He silently slipped out of the bedroom under the pretext of taking a shower. Streams of hot water lashed his face, mixing with the tears that had suddenly welled up. Michael did not allow himself to cry, no, he was just very tired. The water was too hot, it hurt his eyes. But his heart was breaking from misunderstanding and pain. When he returned, Emily was already lying under the covers, facing the wall. Michael carefully lay down next to her. There were a few inches of emptiness between their bodies, which felt like an abyss. He lay there, staring into the darkness, listening to her breathing. Was he asleep or pretending? Before, they always said goodnight to each other, touching their legs under the covers to feel close. Today, there was an icy wall of alienation. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a quiet sound, a short vibration signal. Michael became wary. It was the sound of Emily's phone lying on the nightstand on her side. The wife stirred, obviously hearing it, but remained lying down. A few seconds later, another vibration signal, as if from an incoming message. Emily sat up in bed. Michael could see her silhouette in the dim light from the street lamps filtering through the curtains. She reached for her phone. For a moment, the screen illuminated her face with a pale blue light. Michael squinted, trying to make out the expression in her eyes. Emily quickly turned the screen away from him, probably reading the message. "Who's there?" he asked quietly, trying to make his voice sound sleepy. "Nobody's asleep," she answered in a whisper. But she was already getting out of bed, grabbing the phone. Michael saw her figure slide toward the bedroom door. A few seconds later, he heard her walk into the living room. His heart began to pound. He was suddenly wide awake. Michael quietly got out of bed. Opening the bedroom door, he saw the dim light of the living room lamp and heard Emily whispering. She was talking to someone on the phone, listening, then quietly answering. The words were inaudible, but the tone was worried, quiet. Michael felt his fingertips grow cold. Hiding in the shadows of the corridor, he waited for a few minutes. Finally, the whispers died down. He heard her steps back. He hurried back to bed and closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep. Emily very quietly returned to the bedroom. She slipped silently under the covers and lay down again with her back to him. Michael continued to breathe evenly, pretending to be asleep, although inside he was seething. Who was writing to her in the middle of the night? Who was she whispering to? Why was she hiding it from him? In that darkness, next to the woman he loved, Michael for the first time clearly admitted what he had been trying to run from all day. The idea that Emily might be deceiving him, that she might have a secret, or another person. The thought made his head spin. He clenched his fists under the blanket until they hurt. No, this was madness. Emily was his faithful, loving wife, his soul mate. It couldn't be that she. But the pieces of the puzzle came together to form a picture that he desperately didn't want to acknowledge. Delays at work, coldness, lies about the phone, secret calls at night. Tears welled up in the darkness, but Michael held them back, gritting his teeth. He looked at the back of his wife, whom he did not dare touch now, and felt a new, frightening emotion growing inside him, a burning jealousy, seasoned with fear. If his worst suspicions were confirmed, his world would collapse. But he did not yet know the truth. There was still hope that this was just a figment of his overheated imagination. But doubt had already taken root. And that night, lying next to Emily, Michael realized that he would not rest until he found out the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. The next day, Michael woke up with a firm decision. He had to find out the truth. The night had brought only more torment and guesswork. In the morning, Emily acted as if nothing had happened or pretended to. She got up early, citing an early meeting at the office, and avoided long conversations. Michael barely had time to kiss her on the cheek before she slipped out of the house, saying she was in a hurry. There was no trace of her usual morning warmth. Arriving at his office, Michael realized that he would not be able to work today until he dispelled the suspicions that tormented him. Around midday, citing poor health, he asked his boss for the afternoon off. His colleagues nodded understandingly. Michael really did look exhausted. He barely waited until his lunch break before running out of the office and getting into his car. The plan had been hatched impulsively, but he saw no other way out. He would drive to Emily's office, lie in wait for her after work. If everything was okay, he would see that he had panicked for nothing, and he would try to be calmer in the future. If not, well, better the bitter truth than a sweet lie. The walk to the design studio where his wife worked took about half an hour. Michael parked nearby on the sidewalk opposite an office building. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. For the first time, he felt like some kind of spy, watching his own loved one. It was disgusting, but it would have been even more unbearable to sit idly by. He spent the rest of the day sitting in his car, huddled behind the tinted windows. Time dragged on painfully. He saw employees emerge from the doors several times, in small groups, one by one, with folders and bags, apparently heading to meetings or lunch. Each time his heart leapt into his throat when a female silhouette flashed in the doorway, but Emily did not appear. 1 o'clock. 2, 3. Michael peered intently, not taking his eyes off the entrance. He was afraid to blink and miss her. Finally, around 4:30, his patience was rewarded. A familiar figure appeared in the office doorway. Emily. Michael's gaze immediately sank into her. His wife looked flawless, as if there had been no sleepless night and no loss of strength the previous day. Her fitted jacket and skirt sat perfectly, her face was lightly made up. She was laughing, talking about something with the tall, dark-haired man who had come out with her. Michael's stomach sank. He knew immediately this was probably the someone. The man seemed vaguely familiar, perhaps Emily had mentioned coworkers. He appeared to be in his early 30s, athletically built, with short dark hair and a fashionable suit. He held a folder in one hand and casually touched Emily's elbow with his other as they stopped at the porch. Michael crouched, watching from the shelter of his car. He felt the blood rush to his face. His cheeks seemed to burn with a wild mixture of jealousy and pain. There she was, his wife, looking content and animated with a strange man, whereas with him, Michael, she was cold and distant. They were talking about something. Emily took out her phone, glanced at the screen. Michael assumed she checked the time or messages and put it back. Then the man said a few words to her, nodding somewhere in the direction of the parking lot. Emily smiled and nodded in agreement too. Michael saw how, before his eyes, this stranger lightly put his arm around his wife's waist, guiding her toward the parking lot. He hugged her. Although not too obviously perhaps from the outside, it could be taken for a friendly gesture, but Michael knew Emily's every move. She did not pull away, did not get indignant. On the contrary, she pressed herself closer to him, continuing to smile. Michael's ears began to ring. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to stop himself from shaking. His throat was so tight that it was hard to breathe. What he had refused to believe until the very end was unfolding before his eyes. Emily, his Emily, was clearly not just at work. She was happily spending time with someone else. Michael watched as they approached a silver sedan parked nearby. The man gallantly opened the passenger door for her. Emily said a cheerful farewell to a colleague who passed by. Michael saw him wave at her, then got into the car. The stranger walked around the hood and settled into the driver's seat. The headlights flashed, and the car pulled away. Michael quickly came to his senses. If he wanted to find out everything, he couldn't lose sight of them. He started the engine and, keeping a short distance, moved after them. His hands were sweating so much he could barely hold the steering wheel. His thoughts were racing. Maybe they were really going to a business meeting. But then why all the touching? The laughter? The hugs? No, everything pointed to this being a date. A fucking date between his wife and another man. Calm down, he ordered himself. Don't jump to conclusions. Just follow them. The heart, however, did not obey and was beating desperately, almost drowning out the noise of the engine. The silver sedan drove confidently. The stranger did not suspect that he was being followed. Michael kept his distance, trying not to miss them, but also not to be seen. They drove out of the business district. 10 minutes later, it became clear that there would be no business meeting. The car turned onto a busy street with restaurants and cafes. Finally, the sedan slowed down near one of the restaurants on the corner. Michael also slowed down and drove a little further, stopping at the curb. Emily and her companion got out of the car. Michael recognized the place, a small Italian restaurant called La Bella, where they themselves used to go for dinner. Cozy, with subdued lighting perfect for a romantic dinner. His heart ached. Emily and the man walked into the establishment, chatting leisurely. He put his arm around her again as they entered. This time, Michael thought he saw her head lean against his shoulder for a moment. It was unbearable. Michael parked his car and got out. His legs were shaking, but he forced himself to walk closer to the restaurant. Stopping by the windows was risky, they could notice. He walked past and glanced inside through the large display glass out of the corner of his eye. There weren't many customers at this early hour of the evening. In the dimly lit room, decorated with candles, Michael immediately found Emily with his eyes. She and the man had settled down at a table in the far corner. The two figures leaned toward each other, the menus lay to the side. It looked like they had already ordered and were now talking. Jealousy and pain flared up again. Michael saw his wife looking at a strange man so attentively with a soft smile as she once looked at him. He no longer doubted. What was happening was not a friendly meeting or a work dinner. He walked back to his car and got in, thinking feverishly. What now? Should he storm in there and cause a scandal? Make a scene in front of the customers? A vivid image flashed in his mind. Him flying up to their table, Emily turning pale, jumping up. But what next? Fight this guy? Yell at her? That would only humiliate all three of them and attract unnecessary attention. No, he couldn't act rashly. Michael put his hands on his head, closing his eyes. He tried to pull himself together. The pain was screaming inside him now, demanding release. But something, perhaps the remnants of his mind, whispered, "Pull yourself together, it's not time yet." He took several deep breaths. He had to act calmly. If the truth was so cruel, he had to gather evidence, make sure of it to the end. Michael dug in his pocket for his phone. His hands were shaking as he turned on the camera. Returning to the shop window, trying to keep in the shadow of a street flower pot, he aimed the lens at his wife and her lover. The distance made their faces unclear, but Emily was easily recognizable by her hair and clothes. She leaned forward and placed her hand on top of his, and he covered her hand with his in return. Click. The camera took several silent shots. In one, Michael even caught their smiles, beaming happily at each other. He wanted to smash that damn phone against the wall, but he forced himself to save the photos. Michael leaned against the cold brick wall of the building next door and tried to stop himself from shaking. The facts were there. His beloved wife of nearly a decade was currently on a date with someone else. And judging by the look of them, this was far from the first time they were acting too free and casual. Tears welled up in his eyes, but Michael blinked back the weakness. A terrifying thought entered his mind. What if it had gone so far that she was sleeping with him? Everything inside him twisted. He couldn't imagine another man touching Emily for a second. It was unbearable. Suddenly, a wave of anger rose up inside him, eclipsing the pain. How could she? How dare she destroy everything they had? His trust, his love to trample it so heartlessly. Michael felt this anger give him a strange strength. Instead of tears, he felt an almost icy calm, a purposefulness. The main thing now was not to miss a single detail. He decided to wait until they came out. That way he would know where they were going next. It was all he could do not to rush into the restaurant and grab Emily's hand right then, and there Michael climbed back into the car. It must have been an eternity, an hour, really. Finally, he saw Emily and her companion leaving the restaurant. It was already getting dark. They stopped at the man's car. He opened the door, but before Emily got in, he leaned over and kissed her lightly on the lips. Michael's fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His head was spinning, but he forced himself to keep his gaze fixed on her. Emily didn't pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck. Michael's vision blurred. It was too much. His worst fears were being confirmed in the most graphic way possible. One more moment, and he would break. But the man had already pulled away, helping Emily into the car. Then he got in himself, and the silver sedan moved off. Michael couldn't move for a few seconds, stunned by what he had seen. His own pulse was in his ears. Then, coming to his senses, he abruptly started the engine and drove after them. He barely realized where and how he was going. All his attention was riveted to the taillights of the car in front. They were heading towards a residential area on the outskirts. Michael remembered. It seemed that this man lived not far from their office. Emily once mentioned a new employee who moved into an apartment closer to work, so they were going to his house. Her heart ached again. If she stayed with him now, it would mean that she had finally crossed the line. Although, isn't a kiss that line? The silver sedan turned onto a quiet street and stopped in front of a low-rise apartment building. Michael turned off the headlights and parked a little distance away in the shade of the trees. He watched as Emily and her lover got out of the car. The man put his arm around her shoulders, and they talked quietly as they walked toward the entrance. A dim light burned at the entrance. Emily turned around for a moment before going inside. Michael thought, or imagined it, that a shadow of worry flickered across her face, as if she were scanning the street. He hunched his shoulders, hiding behind the steering wheel. She probably couldn't see him in the darkness, but inside he froze. A second later, Emily disappeared behind the entrance door after the man. Michael was alone in the darkness of the car. He stared at the empty street, feeling the world crumble. She had gone to him. His Emily was with someone else now. The lights in the downstairs windows of the house across the street had gone out. It looked like they had moved up. Maybe the lights were on up there on the third or fourth floor because of their presence. Michael imagined her taking off her jacket, someone else's hands touching her hot skin. Nausea rose in his throat. He opened the car door, greedily gulping in fresh air, afraid of suffocating. It seemed like it was starting to rain in the sky. A few cold drops fell on his cheek. Or were they tears? He didn't know. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. He wanted to act, but his body wouldn't obey. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes passed. Michael sat in the open car in the drizzling rain until he realized there was no point in waiting any longer. Emily wouldn't be coming out anytime soon. She'd probably be back late at night or tomorrow morning, lying that she was late at work or with a friend. This thought was the last straw. Michael slammed the door, wiped his wet face with his sleeve, started the engine, and tore away from this house. Darkness came into his life. The night was endlessly long. Michael returned home closer to midnight, although he barely remembered the route automatic actions behind the wheel, as if in a trance. The house greeted him with silence and darkness. Emily was gone. Everything in the hallway was as they had left it that morning. His wife's slippers stood neatly against the wall. Her light scarf hung on a hook. Everything looked deceptively ordinary, as if nothing had happened. Michael walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. He didn't have the strength to undress. He sat in a rain-soaked jacket, his hands behind his head, staring blankly at the wall. His mind refused to accept what he saw. Images: Emily laughing with him, Emily kissing him, Emily entering someone else's house flashed through his head, each one sharper than a knife. How long he sat there, he didn't know. At some point, he glanced at his phone. Pointless, there were no messages from his wife, of course. She hadn't even tried to make up a lie for him today. Apparently, she had decided that Michael was asleep anyway and wouldn't suspect anything. A new wave of pain rolled over her from this thought. Was she really so sure that he would continue to blindly believe? That her lies would go on forever? The clock struck 2 in the morning. Outside the window, the rain continued to drizzle, quietly drumming on the glass. Michael felt empty. No tears, no screams, only a dull pain inside and a ringing emptiness. He didn't even know what was stronger, rage or despair. Around 3 in the morning, he heard the sound of a motor outside the house. Michael jumped. Their soundproofing was poor, and he distinctly recognized a car pulling up to the house. A quiet slam of a door, probably a taxi or someone's car bringing a passenger. His heart sped up. He immediately knew Emily was back. Michael jumped up, unsure what to do. Instinct told him to run out into the hallway, meet her at the threshold, throw accusations in her face. But he froze, standing in the darkness of the living room. No, too early. He wasn't ready yet. He needed a plan, a cool head. Emotions would only ruin everything at the wrong moment. The door opened quietly. Michael heard her sneak inside. He held his breath and peered out of the living room. His wife's figure appeared in the hallway in the dim light of the street lamp. Emily tried not to make any noise, carefully closed the door, took off her wet shoes. She looked tired, disheveled. Her hair was slightly disheveled. There was a shadow of smudged makeup on her cheek. She glanced toward the bedroom, apparently listening. Michael stepped back into the darkness, not wanting to be seen. He heard his wife quietly walk into the bathroom. Soon he heard the sound of water as she showered again. washing away traces of someone else's touch. The thought burned into his mind. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting the rising hatred. Half an hour later, perhaps, Emily finally appeared at the bedroom threshold. Michael followed her stealthily. His wife, apparently deciding that he was asleep, also lay down. He heard the bed creak under her weight. His heart was racing. He wanted to burst in and scream, "I know everything. How could you?" But Michael only silently leaned his back against the wall in the hallway, slowly slid to the floor. His hands were shaking. He sat there for a long time, listening to his wife's breathing. Even out it seemed she had fallen asleep, or was skillfully pretending to. Only towards morning, when the dim dawn began to break through the windows, Michael forced himself to get up and go into the bedroom. Emily lay with her back to the wall. Michael quietly undressed and lay down next to her, trying to stay on the edge of the bed. He didn't close his eyes for a minute, staring at the ceiling. When the alarm went off at 7 a.m., Emily jerked and opened her eyes. Turning around, she saw her husband next to her. She seemed surprised. Perhaps she expected to find the bed empty. "Michael," she called uncertainly, "are you awake yet?" He turned his face to her. How he managed to keep his expression calm was a mystery. Inside, everything was burning, but Michael understood. He had to play the role for the time being. "Yes, just now," he answered hoarsely. "And you came back late? I didn't even hear you when you went to bed." Emily looked away, her eyelashes fluttering. "Yes, I'm sorry. It was very late. I didn't want to wake you up." "Where have you been?" he asked quietly, trying to make his voice sound casual. Emily sat up, pulling the blanket up to her chest. She didn't look him in the eye. "In the office," she said after a pause. "We were delayed with the team. We had to finish the presentation by the morning. I didn't even notice how time flew by. I fell asleep right there on the couch in the conference room, and when I woke up, it was almost 3. That's why I only arrived now." The lie flowed from her lips smoothly, almost convincingly. Any other Michael who had not seen the truth would have believed it. But now he had the scene of her kissing her lover before his eyes. He looked at his wife and was amazed at how skillfully she pretended. Not a shadow of embarrassment, only a slight feeling of guilt in her voice, quite appropriate for having made her husband worry. "I see," Michael drawled, feigning relief. "And I was worried. I wanted to call you, but I thought maybe you were asleep." Emily smiled weakly. "Forgive me. Really, I won't do it again." She reached up and kissed him on the cheek, quickly, a little stiffly. Michael had to restrain himself from jerking himself out of her reach. Her touch sent a shudder through him, a mixture of love and disgust. He caught the subtle scent of her shampoo. Was there really no trace of someone else's perfume left? She must have washed it off thoroughly. Emily threw back the blanket. "I'll probably take a day off today. My head feels a bit heavy," she said, lowering her feet to the floor. Michael was surprised. She usually didn't miss work without a good reason. "Of course. Get some rest," he said softly. "You had meetings planned for today, didn't you?" Emily shrugged. "I'll endure it. I have no strength at all." Michael nodded, watching her stand up and put on her robe. She looked pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Was it from fatigue or from the realization of what she had done? Was it just physical fatigue? Pity stirred in his soul for a moment. He almost shook his head, driving away the weakness. No, he would not allow himself to feel sorry for her now. It was she who should regret what she had done, if she regretted it at all. "Do you want me to stay with you?" Michael suggested unexpectedly to himself, getting out of bed. "I'll take care of you and make breakfast." Emily froze for a second. "Oh no, it's not worth it. Everything is fine. I just need to get some sleep." Michael stepped closer and touched her shoulder, looking into her eyes. "Are you sure you're okay? You're so pale." She avoided his gaze, nervously adjusting the hem of her robe. "I'm just tired. My head really is splitting." "Sorry, Mike, I don't feel like having breakfast right now." She tried to smile. "Go to work, please. I need some rest and some time alone, okay?" "Be alone." Michael clenched his teeth, feeling the bitter taste of these words. Yesterday she wanted to be not alone, but in someone else's arms. But he only nodded. Okay, sunshine. Rest. I'll call during the day and check on you. Emily nodded tensely and headed for the bathroom. Michael watched her go, then quickly got dressed and picked up his briefcase. Going out into the living room, he took out his phone. The pictures he had taken yesterday were burning in his pocket. He opened the gallery and looked at the photos for a few seconds. Emily holding another man's hand, Emily smiling at him. Her eyes were shining so happily, as they hadn't shone with Michael in a long time. A lump in his throat. No, now was not the time to look at this. It would drive him crazy. He sent the pictures to his secure cloud drive, marking them as private. Then he deleted them from his phone. Who knows, maybe she'd think to check. It's unlikely, but it's better not to risk it. Before leaving, Michael glanced at his wife's bedside table. Her phone was there. He wondered if it was dead again. He remembered how he had wanted to get into it last night. Surely there were plenty of confirmations there. But Emily hadn't let her mobile out of her sight lately, and it would be difficult to hack without her. Okay, he already had enough knowledge and evidence. Now the main question was, what to do next? All the way to his office, Michael was fighting with himself. Part of him wanted to go to a lawyer, file for divorce, throw her things out on the street to hell. The same part wanted to dial Emily and scream and spill out everything he thought about her and her betrayal. But the other part, the cooler, more rational part, held back. The vengeful part. Yes, Michael could clearly feel the black seed of revenge growing inside him. He had never thought of himself as a mean or cruel person. But now the desire to inflict pain in response to pain was almost the only thing that kept him from simply breaking down. She had ruined their lives. Why should he let her get away with it? Simply throwing her out of the house seemed too easy for her. No, Michael wanted Emily to feel everything he felt, to regret it bitterly, to have her world come crashing down too. And perhaps not only hers, the image of that lover's smug, smiling face floated before her eyes. He, too, could not simply enjoy someone else's wife without consequences. By the time Michael pulled up to his office building, he knew for sure. He wouldn't throw a tantrum or beg for an explanation. Not now, not tonight. Let Emily think she was still managing to lead him by the nose. It would hurt all the more when he revealed his cards. His gaze dropped to the wedding band on his finger. The gold band gleamed dully in the morning light. 9 years of marriage. He remembered putting that ring on Emily's finger, how they had both trembled with happiness. Michael gripped the steering wheel. It had all been a lie, or at least it was a lie now. He took off the ring and threw it in the glove compartment. Now it only made him angry. The whole day at work passed in a fog. Michael barely remembered what he did. He signed something, discussed something out of inertia, automatically, with a stony expression on his face. His colleagues looked at him warily. He was pale and silent, but no one dared to ask. At some point, his boss, with whom he had a rather friendly relationship, looked in and advised him to go home and rest, since he was feeling so bad. Michael waved him off, said it was just a migraine. He was in no hurry to get home. In his mind, he was plotting possible steps, each more gloomy than the last. The idea of divorce no longer seemed distant. On the contrary, he was already anticipating how he would present Emily with papers, sealing them with evidence of her betrayal. But this was only a formality. His soul demanded something else: retribution. By lunchtime, Michael couldn't stand it any longer and started searching the internet. He wanted to find out more about the man who had taken his wife. He knew little. She had mentioned David's name a couple of times, David from the office, a visiting specialist. He didn't remember his last name, but he could find it on the company's website. He went to the page of the design studio where Emily worked and looked through the section, Our Team. There it was, David Rowan, project consultant, photo the same man with the perfect smile and fashionable hairdo. The site said he had joined the company 6 months ago, was single, and moved from New York. Single, so the family wouldn't suffer if Michael decided to pass the information on to them. But his career could be ruined, or his face. Michael wrote down all the details, his job title, a few professional facts. He found his LinkedIn profile and Facebook profile, everything was open there. It seemed like David was quite sociable online, sharing photos of his trips, jokes. Michael even found a couple of pictures of company get-togethers in one of the recent photos. Emily, David, and a few other employees are smiling at a bar. Emily is sitting next to David, their shoulders are touching. Michael missed that. He remembered that a month ago she talked about an evening with colleagues to celebrate a successful project. So that's how it is. The more he learned, the colder it became inside him. Jealousy melted into a clear decision. He would teach them both a lesson. By evening, Michael had sketched out a rough plan in his head. First, collect all the evidence. Then let no one have any doubts about who was guilty. There weren't enough photos, it would be good to get hold of the correspondence or more witnesses. Maybe he could watch for a couple more days, record it on video. Yes, he would film their meeting again, preferably with sound. Then strike. Thoughts swarmed about what kind of strike this would be. The minimum to present her with everything and kick her out, depriving her of support, money, and support. Maybe even leave her without a reputation, tell all her relatives and friends. Let her be ashamed. It's more difficult with David, maybe complain to the boss. But in private life in their country, employers rarely interfere. Although if you threaten her with disclosure of some corporate ethics, or what can you do, punch her in the face. The very thought of punching this scoundrel made your fists itch. Michael settled on the fact that he would have time to think it all over in detail. The main thing was not to let his emotions get the better of him prematurely. The game had begun. In the evening, returning home, he had already put on his usual mask. Emily met him calmly, as if nothing had happened. She said that she felt better, and asked how he was doing. Michael answered in monosyllables, citing workload. "I hope you won't have any rush jobs today," he asked almost jokingly over dinner, which she had warmed up, apparently compensating for her absence from work with household duties. Emily tensed a little. "Not planned." "What?" Michael shrugged. "Just like that. I just want to spend the evening together, watch a movie. We've completely forgotten how to relax." He was being deliberately gentle and simple that evening, and this made Emily look more and more confused. Either her conscience was bothering her, or she was surprised by such tenderness. Michael noticed how she looked at him attentively a couple of times, as if trying to figure out whether he suspected anything. But he tried to act naturally. For the first time in a long time, they lay in bed, hugging each other. Or rather, he hugged her, pulled her close. Emily was tense, but she didn't pull away. Michael could hear her heart beating hard, almost as hard as his own, but for a different reason. He stroked her back and whispered, "You work so hard. I appreciate everything you do. I know sometimes I don't show it, but I'm so lucky to have you." The words came with difficulty, there was so much lie in each one. But they sounded sincere, and he heard his wife's breathing break, as if from tears. "Thank you," was all she answered, hiding her face on his shoulder. Michael stared at the ceiling above her head, holding the liar he still loved madly and despised at the same time. And he swore to himself that he would make her pay for every tear he had shed because of her. His revenge was just beginning. Emily lay awake, staring into the darkness of the bedroom. Michael had just fallen asleep next to her, holding her tightly like he had long ago on their honeymoon. Her husband's quiet, even breathing tickled her shoulder, and Emily's tears were silently streaming down her cheeks. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined that she would find herself in this situation. She, the faithful wife who was proud of her relationship with Michael, would lie, dodge, meet another man in secret. Emily pressed her lips together to keep from crying out loud. How has it all gone so far? She remembered the day she first noticed David. It had been a normal workday about 6 months ago. The new consultant from New York, a tall, confident man with a slight smile, quickly became the life of the party. Emily, as a project manager, had to work closely with him. From the very beginning, there had been a spark between them, common jokes, mutual understanding at a half word. Emily attributed the sympathy to friendship. You never know, sometimes there is just good contact between colleagues. But one evening, after a successful presentation, the team went to celebrate the event in a bar. Michael was unable to pick her up. Then he was late at work, and Emily decided to relax with colleagues. David was there all evening. He made her laugh with jokes, kept up a conversation about design and architecture. It turned out that he was interested in architecture. No wonder they found many topics. Emily felt like the young girl she was before marriage, light, carefree. Having had a few drinks, she laughed at his witty comments, and when they all went out together, David threw his jacket over her shoulders. The evening turned out to be cool. This gesture of gallantry touched her to the depths of her soul. Michael used to do this, but there had been no such romantic moments for a long time. Nothing special happened then. They went home. David only helped her catch a taxi and politely kissed her hand goodbye, which embarrassed her. Emily returned home with a rapid heartbeat and a vague sense of guilt before her husband, although formally there was no reason. It seemed to her then that this was just a fleeting flirtation, an innocent outburst of emotion that would never be repeated. But it happened again. David started coming into her office more often under the pretext of work, bringing her coffee. He looked at her so, admiringly, asked her opinion, laughed at her jokes. Michael was absorbed in his project in those months, often staying late, being tired and focused on his drawings at home. Emily didn't blame him. She understood that the work was hard, but she caught herself impatiently waiting for meetings with David, his easy compliment, his sparkling eyes. The turning point came when Emily stayed late at the office after a particularly stressful day, finishing a report. Everyone had left, and she was sitting at the computer, almost crying from fatigue. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was David. He had also been late and had seen the light in her window. He had come in to ask if everything was okay, and Emily suddenly burst into tears on his shoulder. Stupidly, awkwardly, she had simply lost her nerve. David gently reassured her, stroking her back. In that moment, intimacy arose on its own. Their eyes met, and David kissed her. Emily had pulled back, scared by what she had done. She apologized, said it was a mistake. David had been embarrassed too, and had left, leaving her alone with contradictions rattling in her head. She had driven home, feeling both guilty and sweetly excited by his kiss. Michael had already been asleep when she had snuck under the covers that night, and she had been lying there, staring at the ceiling, scolding herself, promising that nothing like that would happen again. But the forbidden fruit was already beckoning. David texted her in the morning, apologizing, asking if she was angry. Emily replied that she was just as guilty, and so began a correspondence cautious at first about work, then increasingly personal. A week after that kiss, they kissed again, this time consciously in his car, when he offered to give her a ride after work. Emily was overwhelmed by emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. Passion, novelty, a sense of desirability. Michael had never stopped loving her, but the years had taken their toll: predictability, routine, fatigue. With David, everything was different, like a whirlwind, sweeping her back to her youth. The first time they had sex, Emily cried afterwards right in David's arms, whispering that she couldn't do this, that she had a husband. He reassured her, said that he loved her, that one time wouldn't change anything. But everything changed. Emily, returning home then, was beside herself with shame. Michael noticed her condition. She lied about feeling unwell, something like a migraine. He brought her a pill, carefully covered her with a blanket, and that made her feel even worse. That night she lay awake, feeling the scent of another man on her skin, and hated herself. She wanted to stop everything after that time. She even wrote to David that it was impossible to do this anymore. He asked for a meeting to explain. Emily agreed her heart would not allow otherwise. At the meeting, David frankly admitted that he was in love, that he understood that she was married and was not asking for anything, only not to push him away right away, but to give him a chance, that he was ready to wait no matter what she decided. She seemed to be under a spell. No one had ever spoken to her so passionately. Michael had always been much more reserved. He expressed his love through actions, care, while David showered her with words of adoration. Emily could not resist. She seemed to live in two worlds. During the day, an exemplary wife with a slight sadness in her eyes, and in the evening, an ardent lover, greedily snatching stolen hours of happiness. And yet, every time she returned home, she felt a part of her soul dying of remorse. At first, Michael did not notice he was busy, tired, and she cleverly covered her tracks. But in the last couple of months, he began to ask questions, and she herself was increasingly losing her balance. The euphoria of love gave way to anxiety. This could not continue any longer. Emily knew she would have to choose. David was calling her more and more insistently to leave her husband and start a new life. Michael had a career and no children. What was holding her back, he said. He dreamed of her openly, without secrets. And sometimes, during moments of quarrels with Michael over trifles, Emily thought, maybe she really should leave everything. But it was worth imagining how her husband's eyes looked at her, such familiar, beloved eyes, and everything inside her sank. She couldn't destroy him. She knew that she had already betrayed him by betrayal, but leaving would have dealt a crushing blow. Michael didn't deserve that. So she dragged it out, rushed about, and yesterday everything finally got out of control. Meeting with David after work dinner. Emily knew she was taking a risk, but she couldn't resist. She was terrified of breaking up with him, and he insisted on seeing her. Besides, David was planning to move to a new apartment closer to the office and invited her to bless the housewarming. Emily went to this meeting with a heavy heart, feeling that she was acting crazy. At the office, when he hugged her, she looked back, the fear that someone would see coworkers, acquaintances, pricked. But passion won. In the restaurant, she tried to distract herself. A glass of wine, jokes. David was so attentive, so gentle. He held her hand, and for a moment she wanted to fall into this new world without looking back. After the second glass, she decided to go to him. Just for an hour, she told herself. However, once she found herself in his apartment, lost in his arms, she lost track of time. Only when they were lying next to each other, David, happy and relaxed, dozed off. Emily looked at her watch. Almost 2 a.m. Panic pierced her. She slipped out from under his arm, hurriedly got dressed. David tried to hold her back, asking her to stay until the morning. But Emily was adamant. Michael was probably worried. Worried. Her heart ached. She had lied to her husband that she was working late. Although she hadn't even sent him a text message, she was afraid he might be asleep. Now her deception was about to be revealed if he didn't come back. David drove her to their house, taking even more risks in his car. Luckily, the street was deserted, all the windows dark. As he said goodbye, he kissed her, whispered that he loved her, and added, "This can't go on much longer, Em. You have to decide." She knew it. She knew the point of no return was near. After David left, Emily stood for a moment in the drizzling rain, looking at the dark windows of the second-floor bedroom. Her throat was tight with tears. She prayed that Michael was asleep and hadn't realized. Having made her way into the house, she breathed a sigh of relief. It was quiet and dark. The bed was empty. Michael must have dozed off in front of the TV in the living room. They sometimes did that. Emily tiptoed into the bathroom, washing off the smell of someone else's perfume, wine, sex. She felt bitter and disgusted. It seemed that the sin could not be washed off her skin. In the mirror, a pale face, aged by experience, looked at her. She lay down, trying not to make a sound. She wanted to burst into tears, wake Michael, tell him everything, beg for forgiveness. Or run away. It was unbearable to be in this lie. After a while, Michael came into the bedroom. Emily closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. Her heart was pounding so hard that she thought he would hear it. But he lay down quietly next to her, not saying a word. He lay motionless. Had he fallen asleep? She couldn't tell. By morning, exhausted by lack of sleep, she had fallen into an anxious half-sleep, from which she was pulled by the ringing of the alarm clock. Michael was nearby, awake and looking at her. In his eyes only fatigue and tenderness, not a shadow of suspicion. Or did she not notice? When he asked where she had been, she had prepared a version one she had already thought about more than once in case she was late. She had lied about work, and Michael believed her. It seemed. This broke her heart even more. He was so caring, worried about her, and she kept lying, looking into his eyes and lying. Emily could hardly keep from bursting into tears on his chest. But fear and shame overcame her. She was not ready to admit everything. The day passed in a fog. Emily took the day off under the pretext of a migraine, but in reality she couldn't look people in the eye. David wrote a couple of messages. She didn't answer. She had no strength. She slept for half a day, languishing with melancholy. Waking up closer to evening, she firmly decided she had to end this hell. With David, that's it. It's wrong. She won't leave Michael, won't destroy their marriage. Even if things aren't going smoothly with her husband lately, she can revive her feelings, try. In the evening, Michael returned a little distant, citing fatigue. But he was gentle. He offered to watch a movie together and showed attention. Emily did not expect it, but was happy. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe it will be possible to return everything. She caught every kind word of her husband with gratitude, feeling like the last scoundrel. And when at night he hugged her and said how much he appreciated her. Then she could not stand it. Tears came of their own accord. He didn't notice or pretended not to, continuing to stroke her back gently, thinking she was just falling asleep. Emily sobbed softly, hiding her face in his shoulder. She wanted to say, "I'm sorry, darling, I'm sorry, I was a fool, it's over." But she was afraid to ruin this fragile, newly found moment of closeness. Michael soon fell asleep, exhausted by his hard day. Emily, however, could not sleep. She carefully freed herself from his arms so as not to wake him, and lay down on her back. The ceiling was lost in the darkness, and it seemed to her as if she was flying into the abyss. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow I'll tell David everything. It's all over between us. She imagined David would be shocked and would beg him to change his mind. But she would steadfastly refuse. Let him cry, suffer, otherwise Michael would cry and suffer. Her Michael, whom she loves. Yes, she loves it. Despite everything, her love for her husband had not gone anywhere. It was overshadowed by insults, everyday life, boredom, but it had not disappeared. Realizing this, Emily burst into tears even harder, her whole body silently shaking next to her sleeping husband. "What have I done?" pounded in my temples. "Oh God, if he finds out, I won't forgive myself. I have to fix everything before it's too late." After all, Michael is a good man. He deserves loyalty. He doesn't seem to suspect anything, otherwise he wouldn't be so kind today. Emily thanked fate that he didn't reveal her forgery. There was still a chance to get everything back. She quieted her crying, swallowing salty tears. She carefully turned on her side and snuggled up to her husband again, trying not to wake him. He didn't move, but in his sleep he sighed deeply, as if he too was seeking her closeness. Emily closed her eyes, listening to the beating of his heart against her cheek. "I won't lose you," she repeated silently. "I won't lose you. Please, just don't let you know the truth." Inside, she knew she was despicable, that their happiness was now built on a lie. But if she could break with her past mistakes, maybe time would heal her own guilt, and Michael would never know. This self-deception was the last straw she clutched at. And as the clock ticked past 3 in the morning and her exhausted mind finally sank into sleep, Emily whispered, barely audible in the silence, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," not knowing whether she was addressing her husband, God, or just herself in hopes of redemption. Michael felt like every day since the betrayal was discovered was only adding fuel to the fire of his rage. He had been masquerading as a loving but tired husband, and it hadn't been easy. He hadn't slept at night, thinking about his plans. Whenever he closed his eyes, images appeared before him. Emily in David's arms, her lies, her tears, perhaps feigned. With each such vision, his determination to take revenge grew stronger. On Wednesday morning, a couple of days after the fateful discovery, Michael made his first real move. He contacted a family lawyer with whom his firm sometimes worked. Under the guise of legal advice on a personal matter, he arranged a meeting. The lawyer's name was Jennifer Hill, a shrewd woman in her 40s with a sharp gaze over her glasses. They settled into her office, and Michael, his fingers shaking, laid it all out, showing the photos he had taken on his tablet. It was excruciating to talk about it out loud, as if he were confirming the reality of the nightmare. Jennifer listened attentively, leafing through the pictures. There was no sympathy on her face, only a businesslike manner. "I'm very sorry, Michael," she said calmly at last. "But since you're here, we need to decide what you want to achieve legally." "Divorce," Michael breathed. The word sounded strange, like it had nothing to do with him. "But on my terms." He explained. The house was bought with his money before the marriage, so she shouldn't have any claims. There are few joint accounts, no children. The divorce is a formality. But it is important to him that Emily does not receive anything more than what was agreed upon. Perhaps a prenuptial agreement anticipating infidelity. Jennifer shook her head. "In your case, there is no prenuptial agreement, and the state of Illinois is a no-contest divorce territory. This means that even her proven infidelity will not directly affect the division of property or alimony. However, the absence of children and the fact that the property was yours before marriage plays into your hands. You will probably get off with minimal payments if she demands it." Michael frowned. He wished Emily hadn't gotten a cent, but the law was the law, unless... "And the moral damage," he asked hoarsely. "Is it possible to hold her lover accountable in court?" The lawyer smiled slightly at the corner of her lips. "Unfortunately, the times of duels are over. Lawsuits against a lover for the destruction of a family are not accepted in our state. I understand your feelings, but the law here is powerless to take revenge on you." The word revenge cut painfully to the ear, but Michael did not object. He nodded. "Okay. The main thing for now is to prepare everything for the divorce. I won't file now, but I want to have an option at any time." Jennifer nodded her head in agreement and began listing the documents he would need to gather: bank statements, home appraisals, retirement savings, etc. Michael wrote everything down carefully. The busyness of the business distracted him from the pain, as if he were solving a work issue. "And one more thing," Jennifer added, already finishing the consultation. "Don't act rashly. I've seen many cases where spouses, having learned about infidelity, ruined their own lives with thoughtless steps. You're already at the emotional limit. Try to stay cool." Michael smiled bitterly. "I will try my best." At the exit, he suddenly stopped. The last question, purely theoretical. If I had evidence of infidelity and I made it public, would it have legal consequences for me? Well, for example, sending photos to friends or colleagues. The lawyer raised an eyebrow in surprise. "There are no direct laws against this, but you can be accused of slander if the photos are fake, and if they are real, there are most likely no consequences. But think about whether you need it. This kind of revenge sometimes hits the reputation of the avenger." Michael nodded. Yes, he had thought about that more than once. It would be tempting to embarrass Emily in front of everyone, but it would also make him look like his wife had cheated on him. He put that idea aside for now. After saying goodbye to the lawyer, Michael went to work. On the way, he stopped at the bank. He withdrew half of the funds from the joint account and transferred them to his personal account. Not that Emily had ever shown mercantilism, but now he didn't trust anything. It was time to put the plan into action to catch them red-handed. Photographs were all well and good, but Michael wanted even more certainty. He wanted to see them in person, to see their fear, to see the words stick in their throats. On Thursday evening, while he and Emily were having dinner, Michael dropped, as if by chance. "You know, the boss is asking me to fly to New York for 2 days. The client has problems. The project manager needs to be present. I'll have to fly out early on Friday morning. I'll be back only on Sunday." He carefully said it casually, picking at his salad with his fork. Inside, everything froze in anticipation of her reaction. Emily tensed up, but immediately pulled herself together. "I see. It's a pity." She tried to feign mild annoyance. "A weekend without you." Michael smiled. "Yes, I'm not happy either, but nothing can be done. It's work." She nodded, looking down at her plate. Michael watched her as she fiddled with her food. Something seemed to be bothering her. He was even surprised. Wasn't this chance for the best? Freedom? Maybe she was trying not to show her joy. In fact, Emily was panicking at that moment. If Michael left, David would definitely try to see her, and she was determined to stop everything. But Michael couldn't know this, and in her confusion, he saw confirmation of his insidious plans. That night, he intercepted her texting on her phone, hiding the screen. Probably to David, Michael thought, informing her of her upcoming free time. Emily was actually texting her lover, canceling their meetings and asking for time to think, but Michael had no idea. On Friday at dawn, he departed. In fact, there was no flight. Michael had taken a day off from work under the false pretext of a conference. He loaded his suitcase for show, kissed Emily on the cheek goodbye, noting how strangely she looked at him guilty. Scared? Fine, let her be scared, he grinned inwardly. The taxi ordered to the airport took him only as far as the next street, where Michael had left his car beforehand. He got behind the wheel and parked not far from his own house, in the shade of the trees, from where the entrance was visible. Now to wait. Michael spent several hours sitting in his car with binoculars, like a private detective in a movie. Emily, thinking her husband had flown away, left the house around noon. Michael saw her get out, get into her car, and drive away. He tailed her at a safe distance. To his surprise, she drove not toward David's office or the center, but toward the embankment. Michael followed, his heart pounding. Where is this going? Emily parked at the city park by the lake, their favorite place to watch the sunrise. Michael watched her get out of the car and walk toward the waterfront promenade. There, on a bench by the water, he saw the figure of a man, David. Michael gritted his teeth and stopped further away so he could get out and sneak closer on foot. David stood up to meet Emily. They stood a little awkwardly in front of each other. Michael hid behind some bushes nearby. He could only hear snatches of their voices, but he could see their faces. Emily looked upset, even crying. She was wiping her eyes. David was saying something heatedly, taking her hands. Michael took a few pictures of the meeting. Here she pulled her hands away and shook her head, retreating. David seemed to be begging. He was reaching out to her, but she turned away. Finally, Emily said something firmly and walked away quickly. Michael could hardly believe his eyes. It seemed that this was not a love date, but some kind of breakup. He saw how David remained standing, pressing his hand to his forehead, clearly upset. Emily hurried to her car alone. Michael darted back to his car, taking cover before she pulled out of the parking lot. He breathed a sigh of relief that they hadn't come face to face. His heart was pounding. What did this mean? Had she broken up with her lover? The thought caught him off guard. If so, was it all over? Was revenge off the table? No. It was too late. Michael felt that even if she had ended the affair now, the blow dealt to him would not be undone, and he still wanted retribution for everything. He waited until David left, who kicked a rock and trudged to his car. Then he followed Emily further. To his surprise, she returned home and did not go out anywhere else that day. Was she not going to take advantage of the opportunity? Michael was pacing disappointedly around the rented apartment, which he had rented for a day under the guise of his stay in New York. He had rented it so as not to hang around on the street all day. Emily was sitting at home, perhaps grieving. He suddenly felt bitter. Was she worried about the breakup with that guy? Did she love him then? Saturday evening arrived. Michael wasn't planning to return before the agreed Sunday, according to the legend. His plane would arrive during the day. He still hoped to catch her in a lie. Maybe she would change her mind and decide to see David in the evening, or invite him home. But nothing happened. The lights in the windows of the house came on and went out. Emily was clearly alone. Contradictions were battling inside him. One part uncontrollable rage demanded action, to tear off the masks anyway, to throw everything in her face, no matter what she suddenly decided. The other part, tired, whispered, what if she came to her senses? Maybe forgive. Michael shook his head. Forgive after that? No, the wound was too deep. He decided not to deviate from the intended path. Even if the lovers quarreled, he would still take revenge for the humiliation he had suffered. And the best way to do this was to make her confess and show that he had known everything for a long time. Late on Saturday night, he texted Emily, Hi, sunshine. Just flew back, stayed overnight in town with friends, and will be back for dinner tomorrow. She texted back almost immediately. Can't wait to see you. Love you. Love you. Michael smiled bitterly. It was easy for her to say that word now. He spent the night restlessly in a rented apartment. Everything did not go according to plan. He failed to catch them together. But now he had even more evidence. He managed to film their meeting in the park on video for a couple of minutes on his phone, where the emotions are quite visible. If you show it to people in the know, it will become clear that there was a connection. But he will still have the opportunity to bring the matter to the end. Sunday came. Michael came back home around noon, as he had promised. Emily greeted him joyfully, throwing herself on his neck. She looked tired, but somehow inspired, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Apparently, the decision she had made had eased her soul. Michael played the role of a loving husband who had brought a gift from his trip, a souvenir trinket from the airport, bought in advance. Emily cooked dinner, was attentive, affectionate. Michael looked at her and barely contained the pain. It seemed that the old wife he knew had returned gentle, talkative. But he could not forget what had been hidden behind that mask recently. That evening, he decided to strike the final blow. His heart was pounding as he sat on the sofa after dinner, took Emily's hand and said quietly, "We need to talk." The wife perked up and an alarm flashed in her eyes. "About what, dear?" Michael looked straight ahead, his gaze fixed on her. "I know everything, Emily." She turned pale. "Oh, what are you talking about?" He felt a strange composure, finally the moment of truth. "About everything. About you and David. You don't have to pretend." Emily froze, her mouth hanging open. She searched for words, but only breathed out, "Michael, it's not what you think." Michael smiled bitterly. "Not that, not cheating. What about friendly kisses, secret meetings, lying to my face?" She burst into tears. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. It was a mistake. It's all over now, I swear. It's over." He repeated contemptuously. "How convenient. And when did it end?" "Yesterday, when I was away." Emily was choking with tears. "I was stupid. It was as if the devil had bewitched me. But I understood everything. I refused him and broke up with him. Believe it or not, I love only you." Michael was shaking. Her tears no longer evoked pity, only anger and disgust. "Do you love him? That's not how you betray your loved ones." He raised his voice for the first time. "I saw it all with my own eyes, Emily. How you love him, I saw it." Emily stared at him in horror. He pulled out his phone and literally threw it in her lap. "Look, look at yourself from the outside." On the screen was a photo of her and David in a restaurant, their kiss by the car. Emily sobbed as she looked at the evidence of her shame. "Michael," she whispered, "were you following me? How else can I find out the truth if you lie without a twinge of conscience?" He exploded. "Yes, I followed. I saw everything. Absolutely everything, from that night when you went out to whisper on the phone." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, remembering that night. Michael continued mercilessly. "Do you think it's enough to say sorry so that I'll forget how you lied every night, laughed in my face? How did you sleep with him, and then come to my bed?" She bent down, almost falling to the floor. "I can't justify this in any way. I'm guilty. I can't ask for forgiveness." "That's right," he said coldly, "because there will be no forgiveness." With that, he stood up. There was a fire raging in his chest, but, amazingly, the surface of his mind remained icy. He saw Emily at his feet, broken, sobbing, and he felt nothing but devastation and a grim satisfaction. Justice had been done. "Michael, don't go," she sobbed, grabbing the hem of his jacket. "Please, give me a chance to fix everything." He pulled the fabric away from her fingers. "Fix it. How? Rewind time? Erase someone else's hands on your body? You won't do that." She squirmed at his words, but Michael didn't want to look at her anymore. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." His voice was quiet but firm. "You have a week to pack your things and leave. The house is mine, it's registered in my name. You won't get a cent from me. You're not worth it." Emily shook her head, kneeling down. No, just not a divorce. Don't drive me away. I beg you. I can't live without you. She stretched out her arms to him, trying to hug her knees, but Michael pulled away as if from fire. Enough, he said with disgust. It's a pity I didn't know sooner whom I had married. You are not the woman I loved. She died the moment you crossed that line. I'm the one who died, Emily screamed. I killed myself, my honor. But my love for you hasn't died. I swear, Michael, it hasn't died. I'll do everything. Just don't leave me. Michael didn't recognize her. This woman, distraught with grief, was so different from the confident Emily he knew. Part of him, perhaps, was trying to break her the way she had broken him. But now he suddenly felt not triumph, but terrible fatigue. He had done what he wanted. The truth had been revealed. Revenge had been taken, at least in terms of moral retribution. Beyond that emptiness. I have nothing more to say to you, he concluded quietly, heading for the door. Emily jumped up, rushing after him. Michael, no, don't go, she grabbed his hand. He stopped at the threshold and measured her with his gaze, her face wet with tears, her lips trembling, her hands convulsively clutching his elbow. Let go, he said through gritted teeth. Don't make me use force. Her fingers loosened. She groaned like a wounded animal, covering her face with her hands. Michael walked out, closing the door carefully behind him, as if he was afraid to break it. It was a warm, quiet night outside. He took a few steps down the path, then stopped, throwing his head back. The moon was shining in the cloudless sky. He wanted to scream, to burst into tears, to break something, but he stood there as if burned to the ground. There was not a soul around, only the chirping of crickets. Muffled sobs came from the open window of the house. His world was collapsing to this soundtrack. Michael didn't remember driving or where he spent the rest of the night. He seemed to just drive through deserted streets until the gray dawn found him in a supermarket parking lot. There, with his head on the steering wheel, he finally felt tears hot, burning, rolling down his cheeks. Revenge had been achieved, but instead of satisfaction, it brought only pain. His life fell apart, and no one can glue it back together. Emily sat on the cold living room floor, her arms wrapped around her stomach, rocking back and forth, unable to stop sobbing. The house was deathly silent, except for her sobs and ragged breathing echoing off the walls. Michael was gone. Forever, she thought. His last words pounded in her skull. There will be no forgiveness. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. She struggled to her feet, clinging to the edge of the couch. Her entire body ached with tension. Her head was spinning. Automatically, Emily walked into the bedroom and collapsed face first into the pillow, soaking the pillowcase with her tears. It seemed like she cried for hours until all that was left was a numb emptiness inside. Night fell, but she still couldn't sleep. At first, she tried to dial Michael's number over and over. The phone buzzed, but he didn't answer. Then he turned it off or blocked her. Instead of beeps, there were short signals. This finally finished her off. By morning, the tears had dried up. Emily lay there, staring at the ceiling with her red, dry eyes. Her brain refused to accept reality. Just a week ago, she had hoped to win back her husband's love, and now she had lost everything. There was nothing left. No marriage, no respect, no meaning in life. At some point, she stood up absently and wandered into the bathroom. The mirror reflected a pale, swollen face with an empty gaze. I deserve this, she thought with bitter clarity. She had ruined her life, destroyed the trust of the person who was dearest to her. For what? For the sake of fleeting vanity, a sense of novelty. What a fool she was. Emily ran some cold water and stuck her wrists under it, feeling like she was about to pass out. Then she washed her face, trying to bring herself to her senses. No, there was no time to be sad. She had to fight, at least try. The advice of her close friend Kara popped into her head, to whom she had once long ago complained about the crisis in her marriage, without mentioning, of course, the betrayal. If you ever screw up, write him letters from the heart. Men sometimes read words better than they listen to tears, Kara said jokingly. The letter, Emily frantically grabbed the idea. If Michael wasn't picking up the phone and didn't want to see her, maybe he'd read the letter. She could lay out everything as she felt, apologize. Emily sat down at the kitchen table, finding her stationery set. A sheet of paper lay in front of her, her trembling hand gripping a pen. She sat there for a moment, unsure of where to begin. Then, gathering her courage, she wrote, "Dear Michael," she said, and stopped. The word dear blurred before her eyes. She buried her face in her hands, trying to calm herself. She needed to pull herself together. After a few deep breaths, she continued writing, line by line, pouring her heart out onto the paper. "Dear Michael, I don't know if you'll read this letter, but I have to try to reach you in this way, since I've lost the right to speak to you personally. First of all, I want to say, I'm sorry. There are no words to express how sorry I am. I made an unforgivable mistake and hurt you terribly. I regret nothing in the world more than betraying your trust. You may not believe it, but I have loved you all these years, and I still love you. What happened is my weakness, my selfishness, and stupidity. I lost myself, carried away by the attention of another, instead of fighting for our relationship, or at least telling you honestly about my feelings. I have no excuse. Every moment of our life together was precious to me. You are the best person I have ever met. Caring, kind, honest. I ruined it with my lies. I will hate myself for this for the rest of my life. Believe me, nothing that happened with David was worth even a fraction of the love that connected us. It was a mistake that I woke up too late. In the last weeks, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake, and I tried to break free. I wanted to stop everything. But I knew that sooner or later the truth would come out, and I was deathly afraid of this moment because I knew I would lose you. And so it happened. I dare not ask for forgiveness. I know that I do not deserve it. But I still ask. Know that I sincerely repent. Not for a moment do I try to shift the blame or justify myself. All responsibility is mine. If I could turn back time, I would choose you all over again. I would have found the strength to speak frankly about what was bothering me, instead of seeking comfort elsewhere. I felt like our life lacked romance, that you had grown cold, but that's no excuse. I should have fought, or at least left honestly, without destroying your heart by cheating. I understand that you are experiencing a lot of bitter feelings right now, anger, disgust, contempt for me. I accept it. I can only dream that someday, perhaps not very soon, you will remember me without hatred, at least as a person who stumbled, but was not the embodiment of evil. I will leave as you asked. I do not want to aggravate your pain with my presence, but if you suddenly need anything, documents, any help, I will always respond. I do not hope for this, but still, if sometime in the future you need a friend, a conversationalist, know that there is a person who will feel indebted to you for your love and trust. I love you, Michael. I have loved you for 9 years, and I continue to love you now, despite everything. This love is now mixed with terrible pain and guilt, but it is a part of me. I have lost the right to call you my husband, but in my heart you will always remain a loved one. I regret that I did not understand this in time. Let fate reward you for all the suffering I have caused. You deserve happiness with someone more worthy than me. Forgive me. Goodbye. Forever loving you, no matter if you believe it now. Emily. When Emily put a period, the sheet was flooded with tears. She reread what she had written, uneven lines, letters blurred in places from the moisture. Not the most harmonious letter, but each piece came from the heart. She carefully placed the paper in the envelope and signed the outside, to Michael. Then she drew the envelope to her lips and touched it with a light kiss, as if saying goodbye. She spent the entire day packing. It was an effort. Her hands were shaking, her legs were wobbly, but she knew she had to leave before Michael returned from work, as he had ordered, so as not to anger him even more. By evening, the suitcases were packed. Emily looked around the empty house. The walls held too many memories. Here in the kitchen, they baked pizza and got dirty with flour. Here on the sofa, they laughed at a comedy. Here was her happiness, her life, which she herself had destroyed. Glancing toward the bedroom door, where it had all happened yesterday, that horrible conversation, Emily lowered her head. She placed the envelope on the living room coffee table, where it would be visible. It was the only thing she could do. As she stepped out the door, she looked back one last time. Tears were filling her eyes again, but they no longer cried as violently as before, only a quiet stream of bitterness. She closed the door and, pressing her palm to the wood, whispered through her sobs, "Goodbye, my love." With these words, Emily turned and walked away along the path that led into the unknown of her own future, now lonely, life. Michael returned home the day after Emily left. The house greeted him with a ringing emptiness. Her favorite shoes were missing from the hallway, her coat was missing from the hanger. The rooms were filled with a dull, musty smell of loneliness. Michael walked into the living room, feeling a lump in his throat. All these years, this space had been their shared world, now only ghosts lived there. His gaze fell on the coffee table. There lay an envelope with the inscription, "To Michael." His heart sank. He slowly picked up the envelope, recognizing his wife's handwriting. A letter. Michael looked at it for a long time, not daring to open it. Inside, resentment and burning curiosity fought. What could she have written? Another apology? An explanation? Finally, with a heavy sigh, he tore the edge and pulled out several pages, written in a sweeping, uneven style. His eyes slid over the lines. The word "forgive" caught his eye, followed by confessions, pleas, assurances of love. Michael felt a sob or a scream rising in his throat. He threw the sheets of paper on the table without finishing reading them and paced the room, clutching his temples. Too early. The pain was fresh, like an open wound. He couldn't and didn't want to read her excuses. The envelope remained untouched. Michael locked the door of the house and left the hell out of this place filled with memories. For a few weeks, he moved into a rented apartment closer to work, just to avoid having to look at the empty walls screaming her absence. Months passed. The divorce was finalized quickly. Emily did not argue, did not demand anything. She conveyed through lawyers that she was ready to sign anything, if only to make his life easier. Michael hardly saw her only once. At the final hearing, he briefly noticed her shadow in the courtroom corridor. She had become thinner, faded, not the bright woman she had been before. He turned away then, not wanting to meet her gaze. Work and time were what saved him from madness. Michael immersed himself in projects, took on additional tasks, just so he wouldn't have the strength to think at night. Colleagues noticed the change. He became tougher, more withdrawn. Some guessed the reasons, but no one dared to ask. Every evening he returned to a new empty apartment, had a poor dinner, and fell asleep. His dreams were restless. Sometimes he dreamed of Emily Young, laughing in a wedding dress. Sometimes he suddenly saw her with a strange man and woke up in a rage. At such moments he thought that he would never get rid of this pain. Once a week, Michael's mother called. She lived in another state, but was upset when she learned about the divorce. Michael told her that everything was fine, they just had a problem with each other. He didn't want to tell anyone the real reason. Partly out of pride, he didn't want to be pitied as a deceived husband. And he defended Emily strangely. He didn't want to drag her name out of the water, even in front of his closest ones. Gradually, the sharp emotions began to dull. Half a year has passed. Autumn gave way to winter. One winter evening, Michael was sorting through boxes of things, finally deciding to move some books and personal files from the old house. Among the pile of documents, he accidentally discovered a familiar envelope, the very letter Emily had left. Michael froze. All these months he had avoided thinking about it. But now, in the quiet of his new home, he felt ready. Sitting down at his desk, he unfolded the pages and began to read, slowly, thoughtfully. Line after line, Emily poured out her soul: remorse, love, pain. There was no excuse, only endless regret. Michael's hand trembled as he read the words about how much she valued him, how she blamed herself and would never forgive her actions. She wrote that she did not ask for his return, she only dreamed that he would one day be able to remember her without hatred. A hot tear rolled down Michael's cheek and fell on the paper. He didn't even notice it at first. For the first time since the breakup, he was really crying, not from anger, but from aching sadness. The letter had exposed his hidden feelings. He realized that no matter how hard he tried to push his love for Emily away, she had been a part of him for almost a decade. You couldn't just cut her out without a trace. Yes, she had caused him terrible pain. Yes, he thought he hated her. But after reading these lines, Michael suddenly felt that the sharpest hatred had subsided. All that remained was a deep, sad sense of loss. He covered his face with his hands and sat like that for a long time, letting his emotions take their course. Somewhere inside, a weak spark of relief was glimmering. It turns out she cared. It turns out she was not a cold, calculating traitor, but a person who had made a terrible mistake and sincerely regretted it. This realization did not make the pain go away, but it became a little quieter, replaced by a quiet sadness. The next day, Michael found Emily's number in his phone that he had deleted. He was hesitating should he call or not. What would he say if she called? He wasn't ready to apologize. But he wanted. What? To hear her voice? Finally, he simply typed out a message. Email received. Read. Thank you for your frankness. He stared at the screen for a long time before pressing send. Finally, he sent it. The reply came an hour later. Thank you for reading. It means a lot to me. I'm glad you're okay. I'm sorry. Michael didn't know what to say, and he probably shouldn't have written anything else. He simply closed the conversation, putting his phone away. In the winter, he sometimes thought about her. Where was she now? What was she doing? They had almost no mutual acquaintances left after the divorce. They had severed many contacts. Cara, Emily's friend, once met him by chance and, after greeting him, quietly said, "She went to visit her sister in Florida. She's holding on. She's still very upset." Michael only nodded in response, not continuing the conversation. But the news that Emily was far away and safe somehow eased his soul a little. In the spring, memories often visited him. He was 36, and he thought his life had gone wrong, divorced, alone. Sometimes he caught himself wanting to share some trivial thing with Emily out of habit, a funny incident at work, or plans for a vacation, and then remembered that this was no longer possible. Nights were especially sad. But time is a strange healer. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Michael met the summer as a different person. The scars still ached, but they did not bleed. One warm June evening, he went for a walk along the lakefront, the same one where his world had begun to crumble almost a year ago. The setting sun gilded the water. Michael sat down on a bench, looking at the waves. An image popped into his mind. Young Emily laughing, splashing near the shore on their long-ago trip. He didn't push the memory away strangely. It didn't cause pain, only a light sadness. Taking his phone out of his pocket, Michael noticed his face reflected on the black screen, calm, a little sad, but no longer distorted by rage, as in those first months. He realized he survived. Perhaps the wounds would still show themselves, but now he had a purpose to live on, for himself, for the love he once knew, which, although it turned into pain, taught him the value of sincerity and trust. At that moment, a light breeze ruffled his hair. Michael looked up at the dark blue sky, where the first stars were shining. Something like hope stirred in his soul. He didn't know what was waiting for him ahead, but he was sure of one thing. No matter how his fate turned out, he would try not to harden his heart. He saw how fragile happiness is, and how terrible it is to destroy it with lies. And if life gives him another chance with another person, at another time he will make every effort to ensure that the past does not repeat itself. Michael got up from the bench and walked slowly along the shore. Behind him remained both the flashes of sunset and the shadows of yesterday. Ahead, over the evening city, lights flickered. It seemed that someone's music was playing somewhere in the distance, and the laughter of strolling couples could be heard. He walked, freed from the heavy burden of hatred, with a quiet sadness and a timid belief that everything could still be good. Night was falling on the city, promising a new day, a day in which the pain of the past would gradually give way to something new, perhaps still unknown, but definitely worth living on. A year passed. The bright Florida sun flooded the cozy patio of the small cafe where Emily worked. Moving in with her sister had been good for her. A change of scenery, a warm climate, and the support of her close family were slowly healing her tormented soul. She rented a room in her sister's house, helped with her nephews, and ran along the ocean in the mornings, trying to clear her head of heavy thoughts. During the day, she worked as a barista at a cafe on the waterfront, not the prestigious position she had in Chicago, but she didn't need more now. Simple work calmed her down, grinding coffee, frothing milk for cappuccino, smiling at customers. At first, smiling was a strain, but her sister's children, cheerful six-year-old twins, stirred her heart a little, and over time, Emily began to catch herself smiling sincerely at their jokes. But not a day went by that she didn't think of Michael. In the evenings, watching the sun's rays over the ocean, Emily wrote long, frank pages in her diary about her guilt, about her love for him. It was her quiet therapy. She didn't expect to return to the past, but she didn't want to forget the lessons, however hard. She always carried her phone with her, even though she knew Michael wouldn't call. They hadn't spoken since the divorce, except for one text message she'd received last winter. Emily remembered it word for word. Received your letter. Read it. Thank you for your candor. Her heart had leapt out of her chest when his name appeared on the screen. With trembling fingers, she'd replied, "Thank you for reading. It means a lot to me. I'm glad you're okay. Forgive me." There was no response. But the very fact that he'd written that he hadn't thrown away her letter without reading, it was already a gift. Knowing the story, Emily's sister tried to persuade her to see a psychologist. She even went to a couple of consultations. The psychologist said that Emily suffered from prolonged depression due to feelings of guilt, and that it was important to learn to forgive herself. Emily nodded then, but deep down she thought that she did not deserve forgiveness even from herself. And yet she tried to change. She read self-development books, went to yoga classes with her sister. Little by little, she climbed out of the abyss. One day, an envelope from Chicago arrived at her postal address. An official letter from Michael's lawyers, the final papers on the division of property. There was also a check for a small amount as a sign of goodwill. Emily initially wanted to return it after all. She had not claimed anything. But the lawyer noted in the letter that a refusal could complicate the process of closing the case. Then she quietly cried over this check as a symbol of the fact that even in anger, he remained noble. She donated the money to charity, not wanting to use a cent. Sometimes she dreamed of Michael. In her dreams, he was the same as she remembered in his best years, laughing, caring. They talked, holding hands. And each time in her dreams, she knew that she was about to confess to him what she had done, and she woke up in horror, realizing that reality was even worse. But over time, the dreams became less frequent. A year of remorse and self-improvement had dulled the sharp pain a little. Not a single day passed without regrets, but at least she had stopped pouring out streams of self-deprecation on herself every day. Her sister's children loved Aunt Em. She helped them with their homework, took them to the beach. Sometimes, when her nephew would trustingly run to her with a drawing or a question, Emily's heart would ache. Michael had once dreamed of children so much. She had destroyed that dream, too. Kara's friend corresponded with Emily by email. She briefly reported the news of the city, carefully mentioning that Michael was alive and well, immersed in work, living in a rented apartment. Emily read these terse reports, greedily catching every detail. If he was working, it meant he was coping. If he was living in a new apartment, it was probably logical that he had sold their house. Who would want to live among the ghosts of the past? Kara wrote that, according to rumors, Michael was not dating anyone seriously yet. Emily did not hope and did not dare to be jealous, but she sighed with relief, knowing that his heart was not yet taken. Selfishly, she wanted to think that the memory of her would linger in him at least a little. One evening in July, her sister suggested that the whole family go to the pier to ride the Ferris wheel. Emily wanted to refuse at first, but after looking into the sparkling eyes of her nephews, she agreed. The pier was filled with music and the smell of cotton candy. She rode the little ones on the carousel, and for the first time in a long time, it was calm inside, even warm from their laughter. As the sun was setting, the whole family rode up in the Ferris wheel above the city. The nephews excitedly pointed at the lights below. Emily looked into the distance there, beyond the ocean. Far to the north lay Chicago. A pang ran through her chest. She closed her eyes and silently wished Michael happiness. The psychologist had taught her. To let someone go means to want them to be happy, even if not with you. Emily sincerely wanted that. A year later, she realized that even though Michael would remain the love of her life forever, she had to live on, and live with dignity to at least make up for the past a little. She signed up as a volunteer at a local animal shelter, started taking online design courses, hoping to someday return to her favorite profession in a new place as a different person. Sometimes she imagined meeting Michael again many years later, strong, wise, perhaps with another family. She would thank him for the happy years and once again, looking into his eyes, ask for forgiveness. In these fantasies, Michael looked calm, even friendly, generally happy without her. Emily smiled bitterly through her tears then, knowing that such a thing would require a miracle. That evening, while putting her nephews to bed, Emily read them a story about forgiveness. The boys listened with half an ear, already nodding off, and she, closing the book, wondered, will she ever be able to forgive herself? Perhaps, partly, this had already happened. Day after day, she proved her repentance in action. Although no one demanded it, she demanded it of herself. Emily glanced at her sleeping children and quietly walked out onto the porch of the house. The night sky sparkled with a scattering of stars. She found the brightest one among them, Polaris. She thought and thought, Michael, wherever you are, I hope you are happy. I hope you have found peace. Forgive me if you can, and if not, may life at least give you new happiness. A tear glistened in the corner of her eye, but Emily didn't brush it away. She let it flow down her cheek. It was a bright tear not of despair, but of acceptance. She raised her head a little higher, imagining that somewhere out there, far, far away, under the same sky, Michael might also be looking at the stars. And even though they were no longer together, not sharing one life, they had lived wonderful years, and that would stay with her forever. And each of them had their own path ahead. Emily took a deep breath of the warm, salty ocean air and whispered softly into the night, Goodbye, Michael. Be happy. No one heard these words except perhaps the distant twinkling stars and her own heart, which, despite everything, continued to love and hope. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.